Hi, and thanks for watching another instructional video for CSEI 1300. In this video, we will be talking about how to pass a two-dimensional array to a function. So how do we do that? Well, one thing to keep in mind is that if we pass an array, we will have to do it in a similar way. Well, we will have to define the array into some function with brackets attached to make sure that the program reads that it is an array and not a data type like an integer variable. And we will have to pass in the rows of the array as a separate variable, just like size. However, with this particular kind of an array, a two-dimensional array, we will always have to have a constant for the columns. When passing a two-dimensional array to any function, you must specify the number of columns as a constant with the parameter type. The reason why is because we need this in order to make sure that we don't have segmentation faults when going over the array. So let's talk about what we're doing here. So we're basically passing this function an array that's two-dimensional, and notice that we've left the first set of brackets empty because we're passing that as a variable. We have a constant value defined above, and this describes the number of columns that we will have at any given time for the array, and this can flexibly grow or shrink as we need it, if we need that. So here we are going to define the array in main before we pass it to the function. So we define the rows when we start the program, and we will always have a set constant for the columns at the top of the program. So in order for anything to do with the array to work, we're going to need to have a set column to pass it to a function. So we're going to define A with the row and the column variables, and then pass A and the rows. So we're taking in one argument here for A without specifying its row indexing and passing that as an additional variable. So once we do this, we can then go through and use those variables in our loops to access the array at some I and some j position. So let's take a look at how we do this with the code. So when I run the program, you can see here that we're passing array A. We are then using columns inside of our for loop to print across the entries here. So the number of entries here is static. It's always set to 4 because it's a constant. The number of rows could change if we wanted to. So say we wanted to change the size of the rows, we could do that here and then rerun the program. So if I did this, I would then redeclare the array, and suddenly I have a larger array that's printing more values because we flexibly changed the number of rows. However, the columns is static no matter what. So we can see that we're not growing in this direction. We're only allowing ourselves to flexibly change the size in another direction. And this has to do with multiple reasons. One, we want a number of set elements fixed for a given row. And that way, if we need to keep adding to the row, we can, but this will allow us some kind of data entry format that we can specify. It's really good for doing data research for science or for databases or any kind of storage of information in general. So that's all I have for how to pass a two-dimensional array to a function. That's all for now. Thanks and happy coding.